Hi, guys. What's up? And welcome to this first of 3 epic Shogun discussions. The book's so enormous and so momentous, we had to break it up into 3 parts because, yeah, they can all show their heart. I have that one back there also.
That's what I have too.
Mine is the... Oh, y'all all read from that one?
Yeah.
I have that one.
I actually read on my Kindle because I was like...
I did too. I actually read on my Kindle.
I read this.
I read this. Y'all look at it. Look at how yellow that is, guys. This is my original paperback. Yes. Ooh, smells like must. Excellent. Anyway, it smells like what it smells like is sweaty hands. Is what it smells like. Right? Like all of the old paperbacks I have from when I was young, like this one's just old in general, but usually right around here in the middle, it's just like yellow because it's just from the oil in my hands, which is whatever, gross. Anyway, joining me today to discuss Shogun is I clicked on that on accident. Is Joanna, Tori, and Alex. I'm gonna have them introduce themselves. You probably know all of them anyway, but their channels are down in the description. Click and go subscribe to them immediately. So go ahead, Joanna.
Hey, my name is Joanna from the channel Joanna or Joanna Reads if you want to find me easier on YouTube. And I mostly focus on fantasy. I read other genres as well. And I'm very excited to talk about the first third of this book today.
Right on. And Madison, just letting you know, for anybody here, we're going to talk non-spoiler, completely non-spoiler to start with. And then we're going to talk about part 1. And then we're going to talk about part 2. So if you are safe to stay if you have only completed part 1 until we discuss part 2, and then you can come and watch the rest of it. Tori?
Hi guys, I'm Tori from the channel Tori Talks. I also mostly talk about fantasy, but for some strange reason, since joining this crew, I've started branching out to other genres more. So yeah, thanks for including me in on the read, Alan.
Let me ask you a question. Does someone have dogs that are upset right now?
Yes.
Is anyone here?
Yeah.
Oh, it's Alex. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. There's howling.
I don't know what I was hearing. Alex, what is wrong with your dog?
They're just upstairs.
They're just upstairs.
They must. Mad? I don't know. Just upstairs being mad. They must see like the neighbor or something.
Oh, okay.
Losing their mind.
All right. Anyway,
any person outside of me is enemy. So
I got it. Alex, introduce yourself and your dogs.
Yes. So I'm Alex from Tall Guy Reads. Talk a lot about fantasy and science fiction. Sometimes historical fiction. This is my first historical fiction chat that I've been a part of, which is really exciting. And I've been wanting to read Shogun for a long time. So really looking forward to this.
Nice. And I'm so happy that like other people have read it. And I'm also so happy that other people have enjoyed it. Which is, like part 1, I get it. Like I get it. It's weird. Anyway, let's talk about like just general thoughts overall. I'll go ahead and get out of the way that the stuff that talks about the clouds and the rain that I completely forgot about. I completely forgot about the weird, sexy stuff that happens in this book, especially in part 1. Yeah, I like literally just completely left my brain. And then when I saw someone mention his like something about a pestle, like the euphemisms they use for genitalia and like sex stuff. Like the clouds and the rain came back to me and I was like, oh, this is that book. And then it all flooded back, but I had forgotten because the rest of it's so good. There is that is there. And it is weird, but I mean, it's not unnecessary because it's making a point. It's drawing the contrast between like the really prudish British versus like, anyway, we'll talk about the comparison between East and West, which is part of the most fascinating, part of the book. Anyway, Joanna, your thoughts?
Yeah. So my parents both read this book before I was born. And I wonder if they forgot about how much sexy time is in the book. But I was not expecting that. So there were a few things about this book that I was not expecting. I think when I look at a book like this, I have a certain expectation that this is going to be monumental and that it's going to be dense, maybe even in the writing style, or have a certain tone to it, a weight of tone to it. And it's not that at all. I was so surprised because for one thing, I feel like it's very accessible. The writing style is incredibly accessible. It is well, I say that, but it is omniscient third person, and that can take a little bit of getting used to, because I don't think a lot of modern books are written that way anymore. And the inner thoughts of the characters are not italicized. So that was a bit confusing at times when you go from paragraph to paragraph and you're in a different character's mind without any italics. But I was surprised about how funny it was too, and that this was such a swashbuckling type of story as well, and that it's very, very plot driven too. There's a lot of plot to the story. But I do love the clash of characters, and I think you're right that all of the sex stuff is important, because it does highlight that difference in culture. And I think that it's interesting because I really feel like it also, in my mind, sex and death, those are two huge things that creates a huge cultural clash in this book that we can go into.
Yeah. And the third person omniscient, like, it's so bizarre how not used to it we are anymore as fantasy readers. Like back in the 90s, and when I was, growing up and reading fantasy, there were a lot of books in third person omniscient. Like that was common. Yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting you say that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're good.
It's interesting you say that, because I just put out a review for Game of Thrones yesterday, and somebody was saying that he noted when he read it in the 90s, Game of Thrones, that it was one of the first books that really went deep into the third person,
super limited. Yes. Like Martin is like basically the pioneer. He popularized it for sure. The character chapter heading and the deep third person limited, where prior to, that's the first place that I think I read it. Because prior to that, it was a bunch of third person omniscient. That's what I wrote, because that's what I was accustomed to reading. And it was weird going back to it in Shogun, but it's definitely necessary, especially for all of the historical background, which I'll talk about in a second once we finish the just general thoughts. Tori?
So I had pretty much no concept of what this book was prior to hearing it talked about on booktube circles, and but I'm kind of a massive Asian literature nerd, Asian storytelling in general nerd anyway, so I wasn't about to not read it. It's been a really long time since I've read like something that's kind of an epic like this, and I had forgotten how much I love reading something like this. And the third omniscient is something that I really enjoy reading also, and it's something I haven't again read for a long time either, but I don't really have a hard time with the head hopping, and I used to read a lot more of it, kind of like you, Alan, but I had kind of forgotten how much it just was a nice kind of, it's almost like a stream of consciousness kind of flow. And if you can just like let go of the control you have over it as a reader, then you can just kind of flow through it. I was having a really hard time. I kind of approached this the same way I did Malazan, because I knew that I wasn't going to be able to keep track of all of the different factions and who's controlling what and all of the different things that are causing conflict here, there, and everywhere. And so I've just kind of been getting through it, and I'm picking up as much of it as I can. And I'm sure this is something that I'll end up rereading and catching more of later.
Alex?
Yeah. So I think similar to Joanna and Tori, I didn't really know what to expect going into this book. The only other like massive epic historical fiction book I've read is Pillars of the Earth and World Without End. So those two Ken Follett books, but I had an idea that it would kind of be similar to that, but I knew the general idea of, English person finds himself in Japan, in feudal Japan, and like has to survive and figure out like how to not get killed. But I, like Joanna said, it's so plot driven, and I didn't expect that, because from there, it's just never stopped. The plot never stops, and it's a very fast moving book, despite being 1,300 pages. And even though we split it up into 3 parts, I like breezed through the 2 parts that were we had to read in January because the plot never slowed down, and that was really entertaining. The third person omniscient, like The Grace of Kings was the one I was thinking of, because that's like the only fantasy book I've read in a while that is third person omniscient. And that was weird because outside of it, like you were saying, just it's been a long time since I've read that perspective. And I really enjoyed it there. And I would agree that I think it's almost necessary here, both in terms of going back and forth between the Japanese and the English, but also like building some of the history that's actually going on here as well. So yeah, and really enjoying it so far.
Excellent. And I get what you guys are saying, but having finished it, like it is a lot of plot, but also the development of the characters over this many pages. Like we get to learn so much about Toranaga and Mariko and the Anjin-san, you know, and it's so but there's a lot of setup. Like I think the book is finally begun at the end of part 2. Like, and one thing that I forgot about this book is how late in the era it starts and how little war is actually in this book. This is a much more like political thriller than military thriller. In that, like, we're building up to the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600. This takes place months before Sekigahara, and I forgot that it was that soon. I thought it was several years before. It's not. The whole book takes place over months. So where we are currently is in 16th century Japan. The states, the different prefectures or whatever, like they've been warring. There's warlords, and they've been warring for 100 years, like for a century at this point. And early in the 1500s or mid 1500s, a guy like a lesser noble named Oda Nobunaga kind of rose up and was basically uniting, like, because they didn't have a single ruler. They had the emperor, but as we've seen in this, the emperor is a figurehead. Like, he doesn't really have any power. It's really just these military dictators, these daimyo that are in charge. And so Oda Nobunaga was wiping out wiping out the competition, and was set to become like the single ruler in Japan, but he was betrayed by one of his right-hand men, because he was going power mad. Like, no. And in this book they call him Garoda, and that's one of the things that me and Kyle are talking about is this is historical fiction, not fantasy. Everything that happens basically happened. I don't know why Clavell changed their names, because Garoda is Oda Nobunaga. The Taiko, who they call Nakamura, is Toyotomi Hideyoshi. And then Toranaga is Tokugawa Ieyasu. I don't know why they changed their names. Like, these are all real people doing the same stuff that they did. And, you know, Ishido is Ishida. Mitsunari Ishida, or Ishida Mitsunari. So I don't really know why they changed names, regardless. And after Nobunaga bites it, one of his generals, who was a peasant, who rose up to be the general and then end up being prime minister of Japan, because you can't be shogun as a peasant, because you have to be from one of the bloodlines. And so he ends up being prime minister, and this is the Taiko they keep talking about. And so this guy basically united Japan, but then threw away all of it. Like, he realized that ruling in war is much easier than ruling in peace. And so he needed to keep fighting, but there was really no one else to fight, because he basically united Japan. So he went across the sea to Korea and China. He had this big plan to invade China, and it was an unmitigated disaster. Like, just complete unmitigated disaster. And it fractured his support and the daimyo and all this stuff. And anyway, he ended up getting sick and dying after like bleeding Japan dry of a lot of resources and a lot of human capital, like just complete megalomania. We think that he may have been losing his mind at the time, because he literally thought, when China sent ambassadors to accept his surrender, he thought they were coming to surrender to him. And he lost his mind when he realized, like, the truth. He never realized he was losing the war. It was bizarre. So when he died on his deathbed, his 7-year-old son, who we see in here as Yaimon, was put in charge of the 5 regions. Toranaga being one of them, and then Ishido being another. And Ishido's a minor noble who just hates Tokugawa. Like Ishida hated Tokugawa, and they all hate each other, so they can't ever get along or anything. And that's the whole point. But Tokugawa has been like wants the heir to kind of come live with him, so he can obviously hold the guy hostage or whatever. And so that's where we are now, is like leading toward these two coalitions. Tokugawa was a vassal of Nobunaga, so he's been on this like climb to power for a long time. Ishida is an opportunist. He fought in the Korean War, and no one likes him. Like because he was a tattletale. Like he ratted on people. Like he was a snitch. So no one likes Ishida. Like no one. But they think Tokugawa's power mad, like, or Toranaga, wants all this power, even though Toranaga, I don't want to be Shogun. Right? So that's where we are. That's where we pick up. And, the only people who are there are the freaking Jesuits. Like, they're the only Europeans there. So sorry about that history lesson. But that's where we pick up. And there's a huge battle in 1600 called Sekigahara. And that's where we're headed. So it's exciting. Like, it's just, like, the third-person omniscient, I think, is necessary to explain all of that crap that is going on, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like how do you know that Japan, like no one's been to Japan, or they talk about people who fought in the Korea, what do they call them, the garlic eaters? That's what they call the Koreans, the Japanese. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. That's helpful context. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, it is, because I'm coming into this with very little like historical context, and so thank you for condensing that instead of me trying to pull it out of bits and pieces of the story.
The other thing that I forgot was in this is there's so much conflict between the Protestants and the Catholics. I completely forgot about that. The dirty papists from the Protestant perspective. Like, there is so much conflict between, the different, and I really like the Japanese trying to understand, wait, aren't y'all both Christian? They're like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, no, we're not. It's like,
they like can't,
They can't understand like what y'all are talking about. Anyway, so
fascinating. Yeah.
Talking about part one, in the village after the shipwreck and the Japanese like save Blackthorn and the rest of the Dutch that he's captaining for. So general thoughts on part one with Omi and Yabu, and then the Europeans in the village. And like from the beginning, it's just like they are out of their depth. Like, it is so different than anything that these Europeans have ever like experienced before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very fish out of water from the beginning. And like as a reader, you feel the same way, because I came in with not really a lot of Japanese history knowledge, even though I've been really interested in it. So I felt like completely out of my depth along with the characters who were as well. So I thought that was really cool. Part one in general, I think, is very, very strong start. Again, most of it is the introduction of the characters and the setup. I do think that outside of Blackthorn, every other character that was English or Dutch kind of felt the same. And so like they weren't the highlight for me on that side outside of Blackthorn. But I just thought the initial conflict between the two cultures was fascinating. And that's like what hooked me from the beginning.
And he does it with a lot of humor. So, Blackthorn is this nasty, dirty, smelly pirate, and he tries to avoid using the word plunder. And, they force him to take a bath, and just the way that he uses martial arts to knock him off his feet. He's like, no, you will take bath. And the fact that the Japanese, even though they might think barbarian and they might be frustrated, they are so polite with the way that they speak. And so it's always super passive aggressive, the way they speak to each other if they're hostile towards each other. And I just love the way that was set up. And of course, with Blackthorn and his pirate crew, they're just a mess. They're all suffering with like, what is it? They're like scurvy. And
It's scurvy. One of the best parts about this book is just the the clash of cultures, the fact that both cultures think they're the civilized one.
Yeah.
Like the Europeans do not understand how these people are so uncivilized that they don't freaking eat meat. They have no regard for human life. They just kill like wantonly. And the Japanese are like, these people are disgusting. They live like animals. They don't bathe. They're vile. Like, it's just so interesting to see how both parties think they're the right ones.
Yeah.
And
you know,
just,
something that I watched today, I watched Josh's review of this, Red Fury Books, and he brought up such a good point that Clavell does a good job in the way that he writes the story, not making one culture superior to another. And even within the religions and the religious clashes, I never get the sense that the author is favoring one side over the other. It's like, but you see through both lenses how, you know, you see through the Japanese lens how barbaric Blackthorn and the pirates are. And you see through Blackthorn's viewpoint how, what do you mean you lie with little boys? You know, and you know, that just, it's crazy. So yeah, it's wild just to see those different viewpoints, but without, he does a good job as an author of not making it clear that, you know, he's favoring one over the other.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was really interesting to me when they arrive in the village at first, and Omi beheads somebody almost immediately.
That's the moment where, like,
we're in Japan now, right? Yeah, and that was like such a cool. I think I actually appreciate the way, for me as a reader, coming from my background, I appreciate reading this, because if we were just reading like a history textbook with all of this information that went right in and using all of the terms and doing like, just, it would have been a lot harder for me to immerse right away. And so I really appreciate that we're like kind of learning about the Japanese culture through Blackthorn, and we're given little bits of it at a time, which is making now in part 2, I feel like I'm completely immersed in the culture and all of the like customs and rituals and things that they're doing. And it doesn't, I've kind of had that same journey as Blackthorn, where he's not seeing it, you know, he kind of goes through that journey with us. And I really appreciate that kind of slow burn entrance into the world. So, but yeah, I love contrasts in books, whether that's two parallel characters that are complete contrasts to each other, or contrasting viewpoints or cultures or anything like that. And so I'm just having an absolute blast with the way that these two cultures view each other, and the humor from pretty much all of the characters, whatever perspective they're coming from, is just great. I love it.
Yeah. And like the third, like, because of the front that the Japanese give, like their public face, they're always very polite to each other, but even among each other, they're always scheming against each other. Without third person omniscient, I don't know how you would do that other than having 100 POVs.
No,
you know
you're
what I mean?
absolutely right. Yeah.
Like, we have to know, because that's just such a part of who the Japanese characters are. It's such a part of their culture to you are obedient, you have that public face, but behind you're waiting for a moment of weakness, or you're, you know, like Yabu is the perfect example. Like, whose side is this dude on? Like, he's driving me crazy. And, you know, and then the moments we see with Toranaga later, but even even Omi is conspiring against his uncle. Like, we have to know what's inside their head. And that just, the contrast of the fact that Blackthorn saves his men by allowing Omi to pee on his back, but the samurai cannot understand how they could ever let someone do that. But for Blackthorn, it's like, okay, like, I'm saving my men's lives. And that's when they're talking about, like, no, these Europeans, and, you know, they're Christian, they're Jesu God, right? They value life. And so they value life more than honor. So for the samurai, they're like, you can never
completely
recover
backwards.
From that. Yeah. But for Blackthorn, it's like, okay, like I'll just sit and wait, but at least Peter Zune doesn't get boiled alive. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's just fascinating to me. And
Well,
it was the first time I read it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because there's such a it's like an onion where like every level of characters that we're introduced to have conflict. So you have the conflict like at the lower level between, you know, Blackthorn and whoever his captors are at the beginning, and then you move up a layer, and then we have Omi and we have Yabu, and they have like, they're all very deferential to each other, but you can tell that there's like things there and something, you know. And then we move up another, like there, it keeps adding layers, and we're slowly working our way up toward the top echelons. But it's just amazing to see all those different layers of conflict and how they interweave.
Yes, Omi, then Yabu, then we have Hiramatsu, and then Toranaga.
It was a lot to follow, and a lot
Yeah.
of names at the beginning. I actually did a whole chart where I started charting out all the names, and I'm glad I did that like early on, because I would have been lost within the first few pages. There was a lot to follow. And that's so funny, Andrew, what Andrew's saying about your logo lining up with my library. You're burning my library.
I think with the third person omniscient, what that also allows to do, I think right in the beginning, like the first 60 pages, you see everything from Blackthorn's point of view. And then we immediately go, like he has a translator translating for him in order to have this conversation with the Japanese. And then all of a sudden, Clavell switches to the Japanese, and they're trying to understand what he's saying from their lens, because there's like a language barrier. And I don't think I've seen that a lot before, even in fantasy with like fantasy languages or anything like that, where you see both sides trying to understand each other's language. And I just thought that was a very interesting barrier. And there was the commentary that each like culture was providing on the other throughout that initial confrontation was funny, but also like very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Like that is something you don't see a lot in fantasy books, is language barriers. Just, I mean, again, it could be not.
It's usually like solved pretty quickly or something.
Yeah, exactly. Because otherwise, it's like, okay, we're gonna like, how many pages are we gonna have of people not being able to communicate? Like, I'm not sure that's always super interesting to read, but here it is.
Yeah,
that's a good point about the language barrier. I don't know why. I just thought it was kind of funny too, the scene where the samurai ends up in that prison.
In the pit.
The pit, yes, with the with the other pirates, and he's trying to commit seppuku or whatever. Like he's trying to, and he's just failing miserably.
Yeah, and the Europeans can't understand that either. They're like, how? Like what? Like for what? Like
he's like dunking his head in the latrine.
Yeah,
but he couldn't bring himself to kill himself in the poop bucket. But just the fact that they're put in the pit because they refuse to behave like civilized people, like they scream and they won't like listen to and they're just loud and all of this other stuff. And so they're like, okay, well, until y'all can act like not like, you know, animals, we're gonna put you in this pit. And they warn them, and then, you know, they don't, and so they pull one out and boil him alive for the entire evening. Yes,
the seppuku stuff is, there's a lot of seppuku conversation, and it was interesting when you would see there were a couple scenes where someone would ask to commit seppuku and they would get denied, and then all of a sudden they would be like, they would lose their honor by being denied the ability to commit seppuku. And
that's
it's just like,
worse.
Wow,
that's like killing yourself is better than being told you're not allowed to.
Well, and I think it just goes to show, like, we have this word honor, right? And we have this is what honor is. This is our definition of honor. Well, it's interesting to me because you're showing two different cultures that have completely different definitions of the same concept. We have, you know, Blackthorn and the Dutch and whoever have this kind of life, like you said, life-based honor system where we go back for the man left behind. We we put ourselves, you know, kind of that self-sacrifice to save other people, and that's bravery and that's honor. And for the Japanese, putting, like, they're still doing that self-sacrifice, but it's in a completely different mindset. It's I'm self-sacrificing who I am as a person to fulfill my duty to my liege lord or whoever my superior happens to be. But like, if you get left behind or you fail, you don't want someone coming back for you, because that's dishonorable. You want to be allowed to, like, I failed, let's try it again. So I just thought that was really interesting how, that same concept is completely different for two different perspectives.
And I think some of that goes into their concept of karma and of past lives and being in rebirth. And I thought that was interesting too, just to see the contrast of karma versus God's will. It's like, from the Christian point of view, it's if something happens that you couldn't prevent or just was going to happen, it was like, that's because it was God's will. And the Japanese are like, oh, it's karma. So I just thought it was interesting. I'm like, they're saying the same thing, just in two different ways.
Yeah. And we're going to end up talking about part 2 now, because we're bleeding into like a lot of the themes that don't really come into play till part 2.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
No, fine, because I want to build on what you said, is the fact, like, it's so interesting, like Mariko, who is a Christian, like she is, but she's Japanese first. Like, she is first samurai, and she's just insistent. And Blackthorn's like, you can't do that. And she's like, and I love, so sorry. Like, anytime she's trying to, like, she disagrees or is, she's like, why isn't Buntaro fighting like a man? So sorry, please be patient for that. This is not how we, like, it's always so sorry. Like, we don't, this is just not, like, we get that it's not what you think. So sorry, and so like, the mindset is just completely different. Like, she is samurai first, and that's how she convinces Toranaga, not to make her renounce her faith. She's like, no, my first devotion is to Toranaga, because I'm Japanese first, and then I'm Christian, which is just completely foreign to to the Europeans, whose religion is like paramount, Protestant versus Catholic, those dirty papists, you know what I mean? Like, oh, like those Horsen Portuguese or whatever. So it's just so interesting. And then part 2, where Toranaga comes in, like, I think the game just, like, steps up when we get to see Toranaga's perspective.
Yeah.
Thoughts on part 2?
I will say Mariko is probably my favorite character at this point, which kind of surprises me.
Yeah, great character.
She's amazing. And at first I was like, okay, she's, kind of what I'm expecting. And then she's like, by the way, I have a sword. And I'm like, all right, I love you. But I love, one of the things I really am loving about the Third Omniscient, again, it's not just for the historical context and the, getting a bigger picture of the world that we're in, but it's also giving you such a well-rounded character view as well, because you can show Blackthorn being really frustrated because he's trying to understand things, and Mariko's so sorry, but then at the same time, right after that, she's really frustrated by him, and she's trying, like, you get inside her head, and she's just, but she's not going to show it, So I really love that we're getting, and it's what she gets frustrated about too, makes me laugh.
I absolutely love how the conflict that comes up between her and Blackthorn over, is it Buntaro, her husband, and about his honor, and how she just is like, no, it's good for him to commit seppuku, and he's like, no, we could save him. Just that conflict was, it brought up a lot of, it seems to be an opening point of like, why are you thinking that way? And trying to understand each other in the way that they grapple to understand each other. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Alex?
Yeah, I love part 2. I think, like you, Toranaga really stepped the book up for me. He's probably my favorite character, honestly. I think right now, just because I think he's so intriguing and you don't really know everything there is to know yet. But I like watching his ambitions kind of like develop as you start learning more
He
about
doesn't
him.
want to be Shogun. He doesn't want to be Shogun.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like some of the scenes between him and Blackthorn and Marco, and then the Jesuit priest, who I forget what his name
Alvido,
is.
Father
Alvido.
Alvido.
Yeah, the conversation
Super
between
fun.
them that's where you learn so much about like the Protestant versus Catholic division, and you learn like how they have basically decided who's going to control Japanese land, and the Japanese are like, who's controlling our land? And then it's just
I
like
just got chills. That whole
a
scene
lot
where
of stuff.
Toranaga's like, I'm sorry, what? Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
Where
Like,
Toranaga's just
I love that
asking him
scene.
questions. That's a
Yeah.
great scene.
I also
Yeah, that
love
was like
the. Go ahead,
so
Doug.
good.
Sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that scene is like very memorable for me out of that part 2, especially.
And then like on the back of it, when Toranaga summons Father Alvido, it's like, so I'm sorry, who controls, like, and he's just asking with information that he already knows to see if the Portuguese will lie to him. And oh, it's so good. But also Toranaga realizing how small his country is. That's what someone was saying earlier in the chat. Like they thought they're the land of the gods, like they're the center of the world. Go ahead, Tori. Sorry.
I have to figure out what I was going to say. I also really liked what's her name? Kiritsubo, who is Toranaga's can't tell. She's not his wife. She's like his first consort or something like that. And her and Marco and Toranaga, I loved how Toranaga would get all this information and then he'd like withdraw, and you often see the king and the counselors, this kind of King Arthurian round table, when people like are talking about, we've got this new information, what's our plan from here. And I love that Toranaga withdraws to this like family inner sanctum, and it's him and Marco and Kiri, and Sazuko is part of it a little bit too, and like that trust that they have between each other is really, really fun to watch in the conversations between them, and how completely loyal they are to each other. I really like, because that was kind of a more intimate setting than because we're in the middle of this really vast story, and so those really like intimate moments between the characters having those conversations when they do trust each other is really interesting.
Yeah, and you get a window into like Toranaga's character also when during the dancing scene and the diving scene, two scenes that are just like nothing. But we see Toranaga is like, no. I'm sorry, my master would like to know now, please. Like he wants to learn now. Yes, he would like to learn right now. Like he doesn't want to learn tomorrow. He wants to learn how to dance the hornpipe right now. And then he will not stop trying to dive until he gets it.
I love that.
Like these are small moments. These are not political like thriller moments. There's no battle, but it's so it just does such a good job of characterizing who Toranaga is.
Those are my favorite moments.
Yeah,
part 2.
Well, and it goes to show too, like we talk a lot in fantasy writing about, we make these huge epic stories, and I think it just goes to showcase how important those moments of normalcy are, and how important it is to not have, just having this massive conflict, epic, sprawling thing all the time doesn't give you like a real heart to the story, and doesn't draw you in and immerse you the way that it does when you have those little moments sprinkled throughout.
Yeah. And again, the third person omniscient, the scene where he's talking to the priest and like dangling all the stuff in front of the father, be like, oh, Portuguese, like, oh, I've been considering allowing a temple to be built in Yedo. And you think that the priests are getting, a leg up on Toranaga because he needs their assistance. And then at the end of the chapter, he dances the hornpipe. Yes. And that is where third omniscient is so good, because we watch and I'm just like, no, Toranaga, no. And then, oh, Toranaga's got a plan. Okay. All right, here we go. I love it so much.
Yeah. Yeah. It shows how like there's a certain amount of strange. Would it be okay, maybe I should ask this as a question. is it a misinterpretation to think of it as greed on the priest's part? Like the way that they want to control things?
No.
Because
No,
it seems
I
like
think it absolutely
It
is.
100% is.
Yeah, absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
weird because it's like, I mean, I guess that's part of their religion.
They
is
have the
to
black
convert
ship.
people.
They're in charge of the black ship, whose only job is to take Japanese riches, Japanese wealth back to Portugal.
Yeah,
Like,
back.
it's 100% greed. Now, do they also want to found churches on Japan? I mean, sure. But why? Like, it's just so
Yeah.
politics has bled into everything.
Yeah.
You know, as like, oh, well, we don't want to get involved in Japanese politics. Yes, you do. Like, that's literally what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's literally what you're doing right now. Y'all are horrible.
Yeah.
Speaking-
huge control move.
Speaking of the priest, I would say the only part of the book that dragged for me at all so far was the chapter where we leave the Japanese viewpoint with Blackthorn and went into the priest's room. I was like, I don't care. I don't
You
care.
don't like them arguing with Ferreira over when the black ship is leaving?
I was so bored, Alan. I was so bored. I was like,
I struggled with that part too, Tori.
But
that
you
was
can
the
see
part that I.
that part. That
I mean,
part
it's important.
It's Portuguese arrogance. It's European
yeah.
arrogance on display. They're literally talking about how to parcel out Japan and how to get rid of the heretic who has undone all of the lies that they've been telling Toranaga. Like, I like that part. I do understand, but I like that part just because it shows the arrogant people who have been in control this entire time. They're on their back foot trying to figure out, and they don't even realize how arrogant they're being. Like, Ferreira couldn't care less. He's like, why don't we just kill Toranaga? Like I don't understand why we don't just shoot Toranaga in the face. And the guy's so clueless. He's so clueless. And you've got Del Aqua and Alvida, who doesn't understand. Like, Alvida's used to being like the number one like advisor because, you know, he was the main translator for the Taiko. And so he's just like, oh no, why is he using this girl instead of me? And they're like, oh, don't worry, we'll get her. She's one of ours. We'll just get her to do. And they're so clueless. They have no idea who they're dealing with. And that's what I love about Toranaga is he has no problem playing the dumb Japanese who's just like, oh, tell me, please. You know, Toranaga requests, please, to know exactly how much gold and silver is going. And he requests that very soon, please. Written down, please. You know.
Oh, I love, by the way, the part where Alvito is translating something. And then Mariko's like, excuse me, but that's not what he said.
That's not exactly what he said. It's like, oh, I'm sorry. I was just trying to, you know, it wasn't important. I was just trying to like give you the they hate it. The freaking Jesuits they hate it.
Yeah, I love that about Mariko though. I mean, I really think she's the one they underestimate. Even with the diving scene, by the way, because she does a perfect dive, but nobody's watching in that moment. So it's like she's the one people are going to underestimate in this book.
Yeah,
she's a huge bridge between the two for sure.
For
I think like I was gonna say, like Joanna, you were saying with how there seems like there's not a huge bias from Clavell in terms of who you're supposed to root for, who you're not supposed to root for, and I think the third person omniscient definitely helps that. I think going back to the priest conversation, that was one of the first times where I was like, I like actively dislike all the people that I'm reading about right now.
You're probably right about that. Like they do seem like a big bad.
Yeah. I was definitely interested in that scene, but it was definitely the first time where I was like, I don't find anyone redeemable on this page at all. So
does that change? Oh, I guess you can't tell us without spoilers. If that,
yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
But even going back to the diving scene is just
it's so
nothing
good.
is happening, but it's so good. Like, think about fantasy books, and you have the ruler, like, has this certain like regality to them. Toranaga belly flops, like, and just like, like that is so unregal to just like belly flop, and Blackthorn thinks his belly's all red and everything. Like, you know, and he looks like an idiot trying to do the hornpipe until he gets it right. It's just cool. Like, I just really like that.
Yeah,
I
it makes
love that.
them human.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what about Rodriguez? Who Rodriguez
Oh,
shows a second level of loyalty. The fact that Blackthorn's a pilot before he's a Protestant, before he's
yes.
an English, before he's a pirate. He's an Anjin-san. So, and I like that they have to call him like Pilot-san because they literally can't pronounce Blackthorn. And I love Rodriguez. I like English, and they always like, you know, says stuff about each other's moms as they're leaving, you know, like burn in hell. It's like, I'll see your mom there, Rodriguez. Like, I love that.
Yeah.
There's such good banter in this book. There's such,
So
there's
good.
such good banter.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Even going, and this is going backwards. I'm sorry to part one,
You're good.
but
No.
the
We're all over
part
the place.
where Blackthorn just wants to do everything in his power to save Rodriguez, and is it Yabu who's down there with
Yabu.
Rodriguez and thinks, oh, we're just gonna die, and everybody's accepting the death, and then he's like, no, there's a ledge over there or something, and then the samurai commits suicide just to get his attention.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and I love that about Yabu because he's doing it so that Blackthorn will be grateful to him because he knows that Blackthorn hates him, you know, because he boiled alive one of his crew. And then Blackthorn is so torn on how he feels about Yabu. He hates him, wants him to die, but he's like, that's a brave guy right there. Like, that guy's brave. And he did save Rodriguez, but I hate him and I want him to die. But also, I'm great. Like, he's just torn. He's just torn.
But it's interesting because Blackthorn, I think you see what Blackthorn is, his character. You see the ugliness of his character at the beginning of the book. And then as you go on, you just can't help but love him. But at the same time, there are still hints that Blackthorn hasn't totally changed, that he's still influenced by his past, that he's still thinking of that Drake guy, you know, who brought back all the riches and not all the men. That's still in his mind. That's still in his mind with what he's doing.
He's still thinking about seizing the black ship.
Mm-hmm.
He just needs to get his boat back. He's got to get the Erasmus back.
Which is, I think it's cool that they're showing that, because I think oftentimes for me in books, I don't like when the character motives shift so quickly, because that seems very unrealistic. So the fact that Blackthorn is still, like, he's sorting through all these different options and he's trying to figure out like what his actual end game goal is, and that's gonna, I'm assuming, keep changing for more of the book as we get farther along, because as he gets more and more entrenched with Toranaga and Mariko and all of this stuff, he, you know, where do those allegiances start to shift, and how, you know, how long is he going to hang on to that first goal that has already changed like 4 times?
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah,
So.
No, I totally agree, Tori. I think that that's so well done. I mean, there's still the trade thing in his mind right now, because I mean, he's been brought up a certain way and he's been trained a certain way, but you know, I like that it's going to be a slow journey for him.
Alex, what did you think of Toranaga's escape from Osaka?
I thought that was awesome.
Oh, so
Yeah.
I had forgotten. I've read the book twice, and I forgot that he goes in disguise as his consort.
That part was great. The whole like last 80 pages of part 2, which is that escape, and then pretty much it's that escape, and then that's pretty.
But
much
also the diving scene.
So good. Oh my god.
I mean, I haven't seen the movie to this. I know there is one, but I'm just like, that is so comical in my head. Just like the ugly makeup on this man, and ugh. It's hilarious.
Like the easiest way to get by them without the Japanese ever expecting. They would like never expect that. So
yeah.
Oh, for sure. And then when Blackthorn saves his life basically by like going insane to but Ishido is just like, you know, I want to hand this to her you know, specifically. And then he's like, like, oh, so sorry, the Anjin-san has gone mad. Dancing around
Madder.
like yeah,
Yeah,
like
which
a
is
crazy person.
it's interesting because there's a really good contrast between, you know, Rodriguez and how Blackthorn saves his life, and now he owes him a life debt, and there's this whole, again, back to that kind of European concept of honor. And then we have Blackthorn also saving Toranaga's life in this moment at great risk to himself. But there's like, Toranaga doesn't like immediately go, oh, I owe you a life or whatever. Like, that's just okay, moving on, you know? And I thought that was really interesting. And I'm curious to see now, as we keep going, once they're all past this, like how that kind of resolves. And if, well, Toranaga also already is showing him a little bit more trust with like giving him the knives and that kind of stuff. Yeah. Which that was a big moment. I was like, oh, he gave him some weapons. Things are changing.
Yeah. And I love the just all of the subterfuge going on in the escape, like Blackthorn and Rodriguez like trying to pin each other, catch each other, stay behind to not get, you know, get shot by the fishing boats or whatever. The fact that Rodriguez, you know, basically betrayed his country by throwing the Anjin off, but also, did Toranaga sell out? Was Toranaga planning on giving Blackthorn?
That's what I was wondering.
To Ferrara?
Yeah.
Like, but after he's off of it, Toranaga's like, through Mariko, so sorry. Could Toranaga-sama wants to know why you were trying to, like, it looked like you were trying to run him and like sink his boat. Oh, no, me and the Inglés, we were playing a game. Inglés, oh yeah, I was just trying to see if he would whatever. And you know, Toranaga's not stupid. Like, he definitely knows that Ferrara wanted him, you know, that other guy, like Blackthorn's ship sunk. It's just so, like, there's just layer upon layer upon game being played upon game being played. Like, and then as soon as they're free, I'm sorry, so sorry, Toranaga-sama would like to go back to his own boat, to that other boat. It's like, no, we're going to escort him to Osaka. Oh, he very much appreciates that, and he would love to, you know, but he's going to go back to his own boat. And, you know, what can they do? They can't not let him go, because samurai will just kill everybody. So, it's just so good. I love it.
Some of the scheming went maybe a little over my head at times in that section. So like the part where Blackthorn shoots, I didn't really understand that part. Can you explain that?
Oh, when Blackthorn shoots at Rodriguez, I think he was getting too close. I think Rodriguez, like, he was warning him off. Like, he's trying to, like, hey, I'm literally going to crash. Like, he had to do something. And so he shoots. And was he aiming for Rodriguez, or was he just being like, hey, like, you got to stop? Because Rodriguez at that point was like, well, if it happens, it happens. Because Rodriguez is so interesting, because he doesn't want to kill like Blackthorn, but definitely knows he should, and is still loyal to Portugal. But at the same time, he's such a good pilot. Like, why would I kill him? And so I think Blackthorn is like, hey, enough, like, enough. And so sorry, Toranaga-sama would like to know why the Anjin-san shot at you. Oh, it's a game. No, he's just trying to, like, no, it's not a game. He's like saying, I'm going, like, Rodriguez, I'm going to kill you. Stop. That's how I interpreted it.
Okay, got that. Okay. Yeah. I don't know.
I agree. I was going to bring that up.
What? Go ahead.
I was going to say that I think, I don't know if it's the way it's written or something, but some of the action scenes in the book I had to like reread them right after reading them, because I was like, what just happened? And I don't know if it was the way it was written or what, but I agree. Like that part I reread, because I was just like, I don't know, some of what in my head the first time.
Makes sense. He gave him the guns so that Rodriguez had to turn because he was being shot at. So Rodriguez can have deniability, because, you know, Ferrara basically says, I don't trust you anymore because of this nonsense. Like, I don't. But Ferrara can't sail the ship, so he needs Rodriguez. And so that's a good point also.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, it's like, it's just, I don't know, it's so good. And then, you know, they're heading back to the village, and You know, Toranaga, the whole thing with the honor thing, like Toranaga has said, so they know that I'm gone now, but he's left message. Like when they find out, bar the gates. If they're about to get through the gates, everyone commits seppuku. Like everyone, like Hiramatsu and like all of like his family, like Kiri is there, like the actual like his main consort, the one he was pretending to be.
Well, and Sasuko too, and she's like very pregnant, which Clavell mentions like 8 times in the first couple of pages we meet her.
and he's just like, well, kill yourselves, guys. Like if Ishido breaks in, if you can't get out, bar the doors. If they break through the gates, seppuku. And everyone is no one even questions it. Everyone's like, okay, that's what we're gonna do. I guess we're gonna do.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Like, did we miss any? Oh, one of the funniest scenes is you see such the big culture clash that you had brought up earlier, Joanna, about like these people like sleep with boys. Like what? And they're like, why did he get mad? Is he mad? Oh, sorry. Does he like, did you offer him the wrong one? Like, what is it? Do they like animals? Do you think he wants a duck? Let's just bring a duck and put it in the room. And now if he wants it, he'll take it. If not, like he won't.
He won't know.
They don't know what these barbarians do, like want. So funny.
I thought it was so funny. It was so hilarious. And I also thought it was, I mean, it was so hilarious too when they wanted to see him naked at the beginning. I just
they gotta know. They're like, oh.
Well, and it's all these like gossipy village ladies that are all like, you know, it was hilarious because
like we gotta know. Ooh, ooh.
Well, and I watch a lot of Korean dramas, and I have watched some Japanese dramas as well, and it's so funny because the village ladies are a thing. Like that is a trope in all of these Asian dramas, and they're just fabulous every single time. So as soon as that happened in the beginning, I was like, there's the village ladies.
I know, and it's like the oldest woman who's like, oh, and she's all excited, and then she's like disappointed because I don't know.
Oh, it's so big. Fascinated.
It was so hilarious, and the fact they're all laughing too at the end point, like even Blackthorn's laughing, which is disappointing for the lady. Because
and his kind of pulling that full circle into the diving scene where like everyone's just walking around the ship naked. They're gonna swim, whatever, and everyone's naked. And of course, Blackthorn, who should feel awkward because he's the only one clothed in the middle of this, like, you know, nude beach, essentially.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, like, and he's like leaning, he's trying to like imitate Toranaga and just lean casually on the railing and pretend that it's fine. And I was just cracking me up.
But that, like, when I studied in Japan, going to the onsen, which is the public bath, was the most, for an American, it is the most bizarre concept because everyone sits in a pool of hot water naked. Everybody. As an American, it's just counter to everything. Like the Japanese are walking around like they're having conversations, just like naked as the day they're born. You're like, oh, she wants one, like, you know, and you know, as an American, you're just. And
did you do that? Did you do a public bath when you were in Japan?
Yes, and it was very difficult to do the first time, but then you just get used to it, and you're like, no one's looking at you, boss. Like no one. Like just go. Like keep your eyes above the horizon and just get in the water. Like it's fine. My buddy and I, there was one. They have them in parks, like in a public park. There's an onsen, and there's just old guys picking weeds near it. You know, there's a bridge people are walking on. There's apartments. And my buddy and I, like we were the 2 advanced Japanese kids, or the ones that are in advanced class. We're like, we did not come to Japan to not get in this onsen in the middle of this freaking park. And so we look around, and I don't think I've ever gotten undressed that fast in my life. It was like a cartoon smoke cloud. And then you get in the water, and then there's buckets to wash yourself with. We couldn't not be completely not be American. And so we cover ourselves with the buckets because, you know, we are whatever. And my Japanese teacher thought that was like, oh, bucket though, like thought that was the funniest thing ever that we used the buckets, but we did, and we did it. But it's so, it's just not done in America. Like, we have British sensibilities. Britain and America, no. That's just not who we are. We're not public bath people, right? Let's leave that to the Italians or the Japanese. Like, I say, on, please. That's what it is. And so I just get so much of that with Blackthorn. Just like, why did they, and they're barbarians. Like, why do they behave this way? Barbaric. But it's just not like you, Blackthorn. So the culture clash is just it's just so interesting.
Yeah,
it's fascinating. Yeah, it makes me want to go back to Japan.
When did you go?
I've always wanted to go.
I went in 2017. My husband and I, we went to Hiroshima and to Tokyo and to that island. What is the island off Hiroshima? I cannot think. I can always forget the name of it.
It's where all the deer are, because it's where you go. We went there.
Where all the deer are. We went there.
I have pictures from there. Miyajima? I think it's Miyajima.
Yes, near Miyajima. I think that's it. Yeah.
It's awesome.
So we just need to do like a BookTube Friends Japan trip.
Dude.
Yeah.
That'd be amazing.
You don't understand. Japan
That'd be awesome.
It would be awesome.
It's incredible. It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous.
Oh, yeah.
It really is.
It's one of my top 3 like bucket list places to visit.
Yeah, I was in Fukuoka, which is considered it's a manufacturing city, so it's one of the dirtier cities. I'd eat off the ground. Are you kidding? Like, it's cleaner, like a dirty city. It's cleaner than the cleanest city in America. Like, I literally would have eaten off the subway, the subway station ground. If I'd have dropped it, I'd been like 5-second rule. Can you imagine dropping some food in an American subway and then picking it up and putting it in your mouth? Are you kidding? Like,
New York City subway.
Oh my God.
You'd be dead in 24 hours.
It was so clean everywhere I went in Japan. It was so clean, and like the subways, people are so quiet. It was jarring to come back in the Atlanta airport and to hear people like cussing and shouting, and I'm like, what world am I in again?
Yeah.
It's so weird.
It's so good. So guys, any other final thoughts? And if not, what are your predictions, or what do you want to see going forward into part 3? Because again, part 3 is going to be the civilizing of the Anjin-san. I think, if I recall correctly. So what are you guys looking forward to seeing, or what do you want to see, or what do you think is going to happen, et cetera, et cetera? Alex, start with you.
I'd say first, I want to see if Blackthorn changes his motivations, his underlying motivations, and how he's responding to everything around him. I do want to find out what happened to, like you brought up earlier, all the other English and Dutch that came with him. Like, what happened to them? They're still at that village. And I don't know, just learn more about Toranaga. I'm not sure. I don't really know what to expect when it comes to part 3 and how it's going to be, how it's structured with 4, 5, and 6. But yeah, really just some more development with Blackthorn specifically, because I feel like we've gotten a lot of it, but I think a lot of part 1 was set up for the overall story as well. So Blackthorn wasn't a huge focal point. And then we started getting Toranaga and all these other characters. So Blackthorn, it'd be interesting to watch him grow a little bit more too.
For sure. Tori?
I mean, I'm ready for a Blackthorn Toranaga alliance and just taking over Japan. That's what I'm here for. So, right, just get rid of everybody else. That'll be fine. Yeah, I'm really curious to see too. I actually was really intrigued by the relationship between Hiramatsu and Toranaga. And is it Hiramatsu or Yabu? I think it's Yabu. There's a moment that I actually tabbed in parts 1 and 2 where I want to say it's Yabu comes up and sits on like the parapet with Toranaga and is like looking at the sunrise and it was that was a major contrast moment, because he was like, look at this beautiful thing, this gift that Toranaga has given me, and he just expects like he's gonna die and stuff, and it was just this really like, it was a very stark representation of the difference in how they view life, death, and all that kind of stuff.
And then they seal the deal by peeing off of it and mixing
I know, and I was like, that did not end the way that I thought it was going to end, but all right. I'm really I'm so done with the Jesuits. I was like from day
you're
one.
Yeah,
but you're not though.
I know.
Yeah,
But you're
they're gonna
not.
big
I know.
bad.
I struggled with that part too, Tori.
Remember, they have to deliver the Christian daimyos in 40 days.
Oh yeah, I know. So I'm really curious to see how, because obviously right now we kind of have the ultimate conflict being between Ishido and Toranaga, but that's going to obviously expand very quickly, I think. So I'm very curious to see. But I'm just here for the Toranaga plus Blackthorn guns blazing.
Huge alliance.
Yeah.
Taking on everyone.
and for Blackthorn to be able to speak Japanese, that'll be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's the main
Fluent
directive
Japanese.
from Toranaga right now is
Mhm.
like,
Well-
I need to talk to this man like without Mariko. Like, I need to be able to speak to him. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm predicting based on the fact that Blackthorn's like, yes, I'd love to learn Japanese. And they're like, oh, we're going to have you learn Japanese. That's not going to go well for Blackthorn. That's my prediction. I think that Blackthorn is going to be broken down so much more. It seems all peaceful and harmonious right now. They just had a little dive together, but I think it's going to get
I agree.
rough.
There's a lot of book left. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is. And
more
I
breaking
don't
down to do.
remember any of it. Like, I don't remember. I have no idea what's coming other than the very end and a couple of decisions that Toranaga makes, because they just stuck in my mind. But other than that, like, I don't remember. So I'm excited. I'm excited also.
Well, yeah, I mean, my parents, every time they talk about it, I keep seeing the emotion that comes over them, and I'm like, stop, don't tell me, don't tell me, don't tell me. So I do have an idea of where we're going to end up, but just on that. But I might not.
It'll be really cool that you'll be able to have a discussion about the book with them when you're done.
For sure.
I know, but
Yeah,
they haven't read
cool.
it since the 70s, so they probably don't remember.
Don't remember most of it.
But they do remember how it made them feel and how much they loved it. And they said that the movie is good, but that the book is just so much better.
And it's just so cool reading it, having read it twice, reading it with people experiencing it for the first time. Because I know that I'm going to get to the parts that moved me the first time. Like, I know one section, but the rest of them, like I won't feel it for the first time, but I'll be like, oh my gosh, I remember this. And then seeing you guys have it experienced for the first time is it's just gonna be cool. And I'm so glad you guys like it. I'm glad y'all didn't DNF.
Oh yeah, I'm loving it.
Yeah. I love it.
Kyle, I already mentioned your thing about why he doesn't just use the name Tokugawa. Like, I don't know why, but whatever. So when are you guys planning on? Because Alex, I know you read Shogun like right at the beginning of January, right? Didn't you?
Yeah, I might. I read it like probably the first front half of January. I might.
Gotcha.
I want to start part 3 right now, but I'll probably wait towards the end of February, back half of February.
Yeah.
Just so I don't.
I'm
forget
going
anything,
to do it slowly. I'm going to double up. I'm doubling up with audio. And so I'm doing it very, very slowly. I think I'm just going to do it slowly throughout the month because that's been working for me. It really helped to break this up. I have to say, I don't know that I would have had a good experience if I had tried to cram this in a month.
It's just too long.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can take it slow and enjoy it instead of like trying to like blast through it. Like this has been like game changing for me personally, because now I realize I can break up any long book. Like I hate long books because they take the entire month to read. But now, this is 700 pages. What if I just read 350 pages a month? So, so that's like, and the thing is, I'm not enjoying it any less. Like, it actually like builds anticipation of like, oh, can I start Shogun next? So I'll probably read a mid-month because I like to read along books mid-month because it's not too early to where I forget everything by the end, and I'm not like pulling a Tori trying to read it like minutes before the live stream.
Well, it's funny because I started too late.
Yeah.
And I overcommitted in January. So that was my problem. And so now I will not be doing that in February. But I think too, I read the prologue at like the beginning of the month.
Yeah.
And I should have just kept pushing through, but the prologue was like,
Yeah, I mean, it's just a shipwreck. It's just a shipwreck.
And I didn't really like any of the characters. So I was like, so I think I waited too long to just dive into the next. And I know better. I've read enough fantasy books that I know, like, don't judge it on the prologue ever. But
so, well, go ahead.
I was just saying it's a huge contrast to like everything else I'm reading. So whenever I read it, it's very welcome because it's just very different.
That's true. Me too.
Yep.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, I'm so glad you guys are reading. I'm so glad you're enjoying it. And I cannot wait to talk about part 3, which is only 350 pages. So it's actually about 100 pages less than parts 1 and 2 together. So awesome. So everyone who joined us in the comments, thank you so much I hope you're enjoying it also, or if you've enjoyed it in the past. It's just like, it's so epic. And yet we have these like incredibly, like, there's no huge clashes of arms like yet or anything. And we just have these like personal moments, like the dancing scene, the diving scene, the parts with Rodriguez and Blackthorn just talking about home and, asking. It's just, I don't know. It's just good. It's just so good. So yeah. So, thank you guys for joining us. Thank you guys for joining me. And so guys, we do not know where the next live will be. So it will probably be on someone else's channel, so that we, spread the love around. So just stay tuned. As soon as we know, we will let you guys know, and you can go catch us talking about part 3, which hopefully everyone I don't think it's possible. If you're invested now, I don't think it's possible to lose investment like through the end. Like, I think it just gets better. So, hopefully there's no Jesuits for Tori. Like, she wants a Jesuit-free remainder.
Like, if Blackthorn had just gotten dumped in Japan and there was not a single, this is horrible, but if there wasn't like another single European in the entire country, I'd have been okay with it.
But then who would he have talked to?
Mariko.
Who would have translated? Mariko, how would she have learned English?
That's not important, Alan.
Or Portuguese, rather. What do you mean it's not important?
one sentence explanation.
Yeah, she was half Portuguese, half
study abroad.
Yeah.
In fairness, I think it's because I'm right.
Studied abroad in college. That's
in fairness, I think a big part of that is just because I'm so fascinated by the Japanese culture and the characters and all that stuff. And like, I've read so many, Western European fantasy books, historical fiction, all that stuff at this point, that I'm like interested in other things besides too. So now I'm just like, yep, I know you guys are. Yep, I know.
No, I totally agree with you, Tori. I mean, I get why it's important, and I
do too.
It more now that we're talking about it. Like, now that we're talking about it, I'm like, oh, I appreciate all that stuff a lot more. But when I was reading it, I was like, ugh, I'm really not into this religious conversation.
I like it because I had forgotten how violently the Protestants and Catholics hated each other historically. Like, I forgot. I forgot how much trade was like, and conquest was wrapped up with the expansion of religion. Like, and so that's interesting to me, is because I'm like, guys, like, y'all are the same now. Like, she's like, I went to church this weekend. Oh yeah, me too. I'm Catholic. I'm not practicing, but like y'all are the same. Like, I can't imagine a Catholic and a Protestant, like a Baptist and a Catholic, like drawing blades on each other. Like, oh, papist, you baby sprinkler or whatever. Like, I can't imagine like going to war over their religious beliefs now. You know what I mean? Like, it's and the thing is, it's not even, it's like when Toranaga's asking, why do y'all hate each other? Well, it's really because Spain or England and Holland broke away from the Catholic Church. Their governments did. So it's really because they have different governmental structures and the way the religion is entrenched in their monarchies. So that's really what it is. And you know, because Blackthorn's like, you know, if we hadn't a split, you know, I don't have, like, I would be Catholic. You know what I mean? It's because of their monarchies. So that's why it's interesting to me. But I completely understand, because like the Asian history is so much more interesting. It is more interesting. It's like, oh
Yeah.
Look.
Well, and I think just because I've read more of the other, and so now I'm like,
yeah, I mean, and
like,
you know, I've seen Ro del Dorado. We've seen the conquistadores, like in Cortez. Like, I don't let it. Oh, the Europeans are conquering somebody. Like, who cares? Like, who freaking cares? But I do love all the discussions with Toranaga about getting a navy so that he can defend Japan from the encroaching other powers. It's like, I love the contrast. I'm sorry, I did this on the outro. I meant to say it earlier. The contrast between Britain, a small island nation that is one of the most powerful nations in the world, and Japan, a small island nation that can't defend itself against the Portuguese the way the English can, because they lack a navy. They lack a modernized navy. And so you can see the wheels turning in Toranaga's, you know, head of like, how do I make Japan basically a better England? You know what I mean?
Well, and it goes to show too, because I mean, Martin Luther kind of started everything in the mid 1500s, and so seeing that what happened within a span of 50 years to get to a point where now like the Catholics and the Protestants are literally fighting this like little mini world war with each other over there. Like it just shows how fast things can spread and change and all of that.
So fascinating stuff. I cannot wait for us to read more and talk about it next month, part 3. So if you're not following all these lovely people, you should. If you have not read Shogun, you should. You could read, like, if you read fantasy, you have time to read 700 pages before March, to where you can catch up to us. So, you know, go and read half the book. So anyway, I'm going to end the broadcast. Y'all don't go anywhere, but thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll catch you next month.